Hello everyone and welcome back to Deckbuilding Derezzed. Today on Deckbuilding Derezzed, I'm joined by Alex, otherwise known as VinegaryMink, the UK national champion for Netrunner, and a world's competitor. I think you finished 30th overall?
I want to say it was 32nd, but yeah, swings and roundabouts. I didn't make top 16, but I put in a decent showing. Thank you for
Well,
having me on, Dan.
yeah, no problem. You certainly put in a much better showing than I did. But well, that's a discussion for another time. So I'm very excited to have you on. We're gonna do a couple of different segments together. For
Yeah,
this
hyped to be
first
here.
segment, we're gonna do the Notorious B.A.G deck. But before we get into that, tell me a little bit more about how you got into Netrunner, how you got into competitive play, and kind of your journey there.
Yeah, cool. So it was kind of like I used to play a lot of card games and board games at university, and through a good friend of mine who I met through playing a different, slightly more popular collectible card game. I got into Netrunner. He was like, "You should see this game. It's really neat." We both kind of like the theme. I like speculative sci-fi and cyberpunk and that kind of thing. So he showed me the game. I played some Gabe Pheromones deck against him, and I was like, "Oh, this game's cool." But didn't really, go for it. But it just kind of on the back burner. But then, and I got into it with another friend, one of my best friends, and he was like, "Oh, let's buy a core set and explore this game together." So we did. We played for hours. We were core set buddies, just grinding out these games and just playing it for fun, really. And I saw more and more people getting into it. So for Christmas 2 years ago, I got my Netrunner core set, and then from there, it's just been playing.
The crack. Yeah.
Yeah. And then January this year, I decided to step it up a bit and maybe stop just going to game night kit. So I went to my first store champ, did pretty well, and it just spiraled out of control from there, really.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of the people who are really in the scene heavy, that's a lot of their story. They try it, they're like, this is a pretty neat game. And then it's like after you first time you binge play it, then you're like,
Yeah,
okay, there's something
yeah,
here. Like,
yeah, exactly. And there's different people along each stage of the way for me. I don't know how common that is, but it's like someone showed me, someone else. I went through the core set together, and then the push for competitive Netrunner for me was probably partly through my good friend Andrew Hines. People know him as Xenesis Online. Makes a lot of good posts on StimHack forums. So we just played countless hours, and again, it wasn't to try and be the best or anything. We just loved the game, but we were playing we were playing tier 1 decks and stuff, and we just would play for 5 hours a day or whatever, because we just for fun.
yeah,
And then we were like, well, we put this much time into the game. Maybe we should try some store champs, try and get a nationals, with no idea how that was going to end up. Sadly, he wasn't able to come out to Worlds, but hopefully, fingers crossed, he'll be there next year.
I'm excited to go back next year. It was just like an unreal experience. And what I think a lot of people don't realize when they see the Worlds coverage is Worlds is a lot more than what you see on the streams. It's a lot more
Yeah,
than the
for real.
play that actually happens.
Yeah, so before I won UK Nats, Worlds was always just this cool idea. But I was like, if I had the money to go to Worlds, I'd just go, I just go to LA or New York or just go on a holiday. But actually, having been once, I don't know what it's going to take to get me there again. If I don't win nationals, I might have to concoct a plan, or more likely just save some money. And but I'm by hook or by crook, I'm going to try and be back there next year and hopefully
Right.
put in a more respectable showing.
I mean, and that's the thing. Like, we make out like bandits here in the United States because getting to Worlds is like trivial. Because
Yeah.
flying to Minnesota, the tickets are astronomically cheap. Like,
Yeah, exactly. We need to book in advance, but I mean, in some sense, it makes it a bit more special.
right.
And it's pretty crazy to get on a plane I mean, I guess you get to get on a plane too, but yeah, when I tell people I flew to America for a week, they're like, in November, and they're like, why? And I go, "Oh, for a card game." Like, and it lets me talk about the game now, and I've been suddenly from being this like little secretive hobby, I've been just been telling everyone about it. So it's good
Yeah.
exposure for the game, I guess.
Yeah, and it was great to meet everybody from the UK, especially so many people that I had corresponded with on Netrunner DB and on the forums that I had just never actually met before. But
Yeah,
let's go ahead and dive into it. So this
yeah,
deck
sure.
is certainly kind of notorious. A lot of people in the community have a lot of mixed feelings about it. It's certainly had some competitive success,
Yeah, one
but
of
it's
those
still.
decks that,
Go ahead.
sorry, like it's not, I don't think it's quite tier 1, but when it's doing its thing, it feels unfair. You know what I mean? Like it's it's not quite a combo deck, although obviously we'll get into that in a minute. But when it is doing its thing and it's firing on all cylinders, the core player on the other side who's never seen it before is like, is this fair? Is this legal? Is this okay? And you're like, bam, bam, bam. And yeah, so it feels unfair when it's working, I guess, like all combo decks.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like not like this is the same type of deck, but that feel of when it works, it really works, and then what keeps it out of the tier 1. It's very similar to the CT Au Revoir deck, that when that actually gets going, it's really powerful.
Yeah. But I do think that this deck is like a cut above your DDoS False Echo or your Au Revoir or your whatever, these medium deep digs, because it's like it is a bit more consistent than those decks, and it's a bit better at playing a fair game than most of the combo decks.
Okay, so let's talk about it. So obviously it's in Chaos Theory, so she's the 40 card, 15 influence
Absolutely.
ID.
This is one of the best uses of Chaos Theory I've probably ever seen. Like in the olden days, Chaos Theory did used to have an upside, which was you didn't have to play a console with her or your garbage Akamatsu memberships. But things got a little rougher for her when they printed Astrolabe, because now there was this console with an ability so good you wanted to play it anyway. So you weren't really getting the bang for your buck on that +1 MU. But here, as we'll see, the magic number is 5. That a lot of the time you need every point of memory you can get, and you really don't want to waste your time and money on hardware. So that MU is super useful, and that some of these cards in this deck are way more important than others. So the 40-card deck is huge, and part of the deck is drawing the whole thing. You end up with your whole deck in your hand, and it's just a bit easier with those 40 cards. So if you've got those, whatever it was, Store Champs Chaos Theories lying around, you want to give them a whirl, this works best in Chaos Theory. I don't think that's up for debate.
Right, and obviously, yeah, well, as you were saying, any deck that relies on a combo of cards is always going to be better in a lean deck as opposed to a full 45 cards. So let's get through it. We'll just go through and let's start with what I think are let's start at the resources, because obviously Bagbiter is one of the linchpins of the deck, so let's start with him. Yeah,
so he's probably the most important card in the deck. Like this deck can't really exist without Theophilus Bagbiter. He is only a one-off because he's 4 influence, but we do have 2 hostage to go and get him. So that's just an influence saving thing there, where you play tutors that are less influenced than the card you're tutoring for. So Theophilus Bagbiter is a 3-cost resource connection that says when you install Theophilus Bagbiter, lose all credits in your credit pool. Now that is a gigantic downside, and it's especially bad because it has anti-synergy with his second ability, which is your maximum hand size is equal to the number of credits in your credit pool. Now that is a pretty powerful ability. A lot of kill decks are working on the principle that you can have 5 cards in hand. A lot of the classic hand size increases just do by 2, which is still not the magic number to get you out of Scorched Earth range. But Theophilus says if you've got the money, I've got the hand size. So it's a decent enough ability in and of itself, but obviously it's one of those cards where you look at it and you're like, this isn't good enough unless I'm doing something unfair with it. But we have Magnum Opus in the deck, which is also probably worth looking at. I mean, we all know core set classic Magnum Opus. Click, gain 2 credits, which is just the card you play if A, you can cope with the MU, which we can, and B, you just want to make a big sum of money because it has no stipulations on it. You can use it as many times as you like. It's not going to run out. So what we want to do is we want to get a huge hand size using Theophilus Bagbiter and Magnum Opus, because if we hit Magnum Opus 3 turns in a row, that is, let me just make sure my maths isn't going to, that's 24 credits, right? 8, 16, 24, yep. Yeah. So that's a hand size of 24. So we've got a maximum hand size of 24 now, but that's not that impressive in and of itself. But there's one last piece of the puzzle. So now we should probably go over and take a look at Game Day. For its fair use, Game Day is essentially a bad version of Quality Time. I guess it can be a little bit better.
Like if you're not including it with anything else, it's basically a worse Quality Time.
Yeah, exactly. But if you have fewer cards in your grip than your maximum hand size, draw cards until you have cards in your grip equal to your maximum hand size. So now it all comes together. So the trifecta is Theophilus, Magnum Opus, Game Day. We sit and we hit Magnum Opus as many times as we can until our hand size is equal to the cards in our deck plus the cards in our hand. We can deduct 1 because Game Day will be out of our hand when we play it. But we also need to deduct a credit because we're going to have to pay for Game Day. So the first couple of times I played this deck, I would sometimes miscalculate because I wouldn't factor in the cards in my hand. or I wouldn't factor in the game day cost. This deck is way easier to play online than it is in real life. If you're playing it in real life, what I'd recommend you do is don't count the cards in your deck, count everything else, because it's likely to be less. So, or fewer, I should say. So count how many cards you're currently holding, count how many cards on the table, count how many cards in the bin, take your 40, subtract it by that number, and that's how many cards are left in your deck, unless something's gone wrong. Also, that also kind of mitigates the downside of if you pick up your deck and start counting the cards, your opponent is immediately going to know what you're doing. They'll probably know anyway, but it's small upsides, right?
Right. Once Theophilus hits the table, people should hopefully know what you're doing.
So because this deck is pretty notorious at this point.
Yeah. And so, why would we want to build a deck that has our entire deck size in our hands? Do you want to explain a little bit about what kind of the key synergies?
The only thing that would break up. Yeah, so this is actually the last piece of the puzzle, and that is Faust, the underway AI breaker that, if not broke the game, turned it on its head. Because when you can use when resources start doing things that they're not supposed to, it gets super weird because suddenly our credits aren't being used to break ice anymore. So we're sitting on a big pile of credits, and also if we can find a way to get 1 billion cards super quickly, then we can just start using Faust to get through things. So the card's pretty crazy. Like Noise just uses it with Wildside and just keeps filling up and keeps running through. But if you've ever wanted to see Faust at its full potential, this is the deck for it, because what we want to do is we want to pick up our whole deck. We've got 20-something cards in hand, sometimes more. I'd say it tends to average out at like 25-ish, maybe a bit more. And then we can just break ice to our heart's content, because the numbers on Faust are also extremely good. You discard 1 card and you're up to 4 strength, which is going to break the majority of your small to mid-range ice. And then if you need to break more, you can. So it's Faust just because a lot of the time you're just using Faust to get through all important runs or to stop yourself from face-taking sentries. But in this deck, Faust is our main breaker. We have some other breakers for emergencies, and also, because we want to be able to, sometimes we are going to run out of cards, and also sometimes we want to play fair. We do need to have the option to play a fair game, but generally our plan A is make 1 billion credits, draw our whole deck, and then we put Faust down, and then the magic starts happening. So there's more to it than just using Faust to break everything.
Okay, so let's run through the roster of cards real quick, and we'll start talking about how they fit into the overall game plan. So we've got 3 diesels. I can't really imagine those being in there, besides the fact that they help you get the things that you need if you don't start with them in your opening hand, and you don't have to spend money to do it. Yeah,
I have yet to find a reason to not put 3 diesel in every shaper deck, other than you can't find what to cut. It just makes your deck more efficient. It is worth pointing out that it's a tad better in this deck because cards often equal breaking ice with Faust, and when you're trying to use money when you're moneying up with Magnum Opus to game day your whole deck, it's more efficient to fire off a diesel and draw 3 than it is to hit Magnum Opus once and game 2. You are getting through your deck faster. So even when you're hitting Opus, Diesel is still good. Diesel is a bit better in this deck than in other decks, and in other decks it's insane. So we play.
We already went over game day, so we'll skip right over to hostage, which, from what you discussed, is basically acts as additional copies of Theophilus Bagbiter that cost less influence.
Yeah, we do have a Fall Guy and a Catty Jones in our deck, but it is incredibly rare to hostage for anything other than a Theophilus. It's nice to have the option though.
Right. We've got a 1 of indexing, which is I think, a card that goes in and out of favor, but it's always amazing when you can fire it.
Yeah, and it's in this deck it is very good because it's so common for you to be fine to get in a second time, which is sometimes the problem with indexing. But here we're using Faust, so we ditch like 6 or 7 cards to get in, and then if we need to get back in to steal Ungender, we just ditch 6 or 7 more cards.
Right. We're running legwork only as a 1 of.
Yeah, so we do have a power turn, which I'll talk about in a second, and legwork's sometimes part of that power turn along with vamp. It's just generally it's a good move to include HQ pressure in all your runner decks, just so that they can't completely neglect it. And legwork is, sometimes the corp is clicking for credits, and you think, well, why aren't you playing the cards in your hand? Oh, probably agendas in there, and you get like 4 points of a legwork. So perfectly good card to play. Legwork's legwork.
Yep. We've got 2 copies of Leviar.
Yeah, so 2 is a really good number in this deck because A, sometimes you lose them to damage, but B, you will often levy twice in this deck. A lot of the time you'll Faust, you'll ditch all your cards off Faust, you'll levy. You should still have a bunch of credits in your credit pool. You'll game day, you'll pick your deck up again, you'll ditch them all to Faust, and then you'll levy again. So it's actually pretty common to levy twice in this deck. Also, yeah, like I said, we don't want to lose them all to damage.
Right. 3x Notoriety. A rarely used, much maligned card.
Oh, it is so sweet in this deck. So to talk about this, I'd quite like to talk about another program quickly. Sorry to skip all around on you, but this deck is kind of interlinking. So let's just have a quick mosey on over to Hyperdriver. So when this card was printed, I think pretty much everyone's reaction was like, I don't know what to do with this, but I know it's extremely good. It's got to be good. It gives you 3 clicks. So where does it belong? It also has 3 MU, which is so Chaos Theory can bear the burden of this card more easily than everyone else can. She can have a Hyperdriver and a Magnum Opus in play. Like I said, there's a magic number at its 5. And so Hyperdriver does a lot of things in this deck. Because when we're setting up the combo, we only have a Magnum Opus installed. So we can afford to install the Hyperdriver. So sometimes you just use Hyperdriver and hit Magnum Opus a bunch of times. And just make more money and go faster. It's 3 more clicks for 1 credit. And when you're paying 1 credit for 3 clicks, that's especially good when each click equals 2 credits because you're a Mopus deck. So it's very, very common to use the first 2 Hyperdrivers to set up. But for the 3rd one, that's part of our kind of, finger quotes, combo finish. So what we really want to do, we want to pick up our whole deck with Game Day, clicks 1 and 2. Click 3, we want to install Faust. And click 4, we want to install a Hyperdriver. We need a Leprechaun in play to make this work. Sometimes you abandon the Mopus, but you can make it work. Like, you've got to improvise sometimes, but you really want to end the turn with Hyperdriver and Faust ready to go. The Corp does whatever they want, and then on your turn, you remove Hyperdriver from the game.
Right.
You've got 7 clicks. Now, you've got your whole deck in your hand. So what you really want to do is fire off either a Vamp or a Legwork, preferably a Vamp, because you should be richer than them. So what you want to do is vamp them down to 0 credits. Sometimes they're richer than you, but you can probably break their ice anyway, so it's not the end of the world. So you got 7 clicks. So click 1, you either run HQ or more preferably fire off a Vamp, or if not a Legwork. Click 2, you either play an Indexing or a Maker's Eye. We've got 5 clicks left, so if you need to, you can go back in to R&D with your after firing off the Indexing, so that's 4 clicks left. So then we run Archives, so we've got 3 clicks left. And then we've satisfied all the requirements for Notoriety. So we go Notoriety, Notoriety, Notoriety. And hopefully we win.
Right, because if we're even at 4 points by the time we've run all 3 servers, that's just an auto win, which is an incredible power swing.
Yeah, it's points the Corp can't do anything about, and that is so, so good, because sometimes your combo-y deck does its thing, but it just can't find the points.
Right.
And so you're kind of forced to go, oh, okay, well, I've got some of the way. I'm either going to have to rebuild and combo again, or I'm just going to have to try and win fair from this point on. But in this deck, we only need to get to 4 points, and then we win with Notoriety. And also, sometimes we don't combo, but we still kind of find a use for Notoriety. It is still pretty solid against Harpsichord and PE decks that are trying to kill us, because generally they can't stop you going in 3 times. So it kind of lets you break the Harpsichord rule, because you can still play it, even once you've scored an agenda. So yeah, it has a fair use. Sometimes you'll nickel and dime and you go run, Notoriety, run, Notoriety. You don't really want to. But yeah, Notoriety is a huge part of this deck, and also a big reason to just shuffle this deck up, because we've all wanted to win with Notoriety.
Right, and it's important to note that since you are running 2 levies, depending on how long the game goes, you can always feed Notorieties to Faust and get them back again later. Yeah,
and we do have a same old thing, so you can same old Notoriety. To be honest, I've never done it, but it's a thing that exists.
We've got 2 quality times. Once again, that's deck acceleration and setup.
Yeah, combo shaper decks always have this advantage of all this draw. So again, quality time sometimes is annoying because you have to ditch the cards, but if we have a Theophilus, we probably don't. It's just a net gain. It's not a filtering effect. So that's nice too. And sometimes you'll just have turns where you quality time with a Faust in play and then run their scoring server and hope you've got enough cards. I've won by doing that too.
Right. All right, we've got one of Maker's Eye just because it's Maker's Eye and it does...
Same as Legwork, yeah.
Yep.
Just a good card.
We got Vamp for what you were mentioning before on the big turn. It just really enables us to reset the clock.
Yeah.
You know,
find a use for all that money. Sometimes you're sitting around with all this money and nothing to do with it. It's a real pain as runner when you have 1 billion credits and can't use them to win the game. Vamp converts credits into game wins pretty consistently. I've played this card fair too. I played this card at UK Nationals. It's good if you want to avoid Caprice side games too.
That's what I've been having happen with the Faust game that I've been playing.
Yeah.
I end up just sitting on a mountain of money that I'm not using at all.
Yeah, so it's just a credit sink.
So we only have 2 clone chips. It's our only pieces of hardware.
Yeah.
So what are you targeting with clone chip when you're using it?
It's just a penknife in this deck. It's not super important. Like sometimes you bring back an SMC. It's not uncommon to use it to get back an SMC to get another hyperdriver, so you can hyperdrive again. Bear in mind, I'm talking about getting a new hyperdriver because once you use it for 3 clicks, hyperdriver removes itself from the game. But sometimes it helps us go and find more. Sometimes it just sits in play. It has synergy with Faust. Bear in mind. Because we can discard a card and then clone chip it back, which is super useful because if we have a clone chip in play and we're using Faust to break everything, Kamainu can get us. But if we've got a clone chip in play, we can pump Faust strength by ditching a Deus Ex, clone chip Deus Ex into play, and then use it to break Kamainu. So it's just clone chip being clone chip, to be honest. I like 2 because it doesn't help you to win. It just has a lot of utility.
Right. You're not doing a lot of program recursion. It's more of like a Band-Aid.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes we need to recur ladies if we're facing Blue Sun and we can't Faust through a million Hadrian's walls.
Right. And I'm going to say that very accurately, Hyperdriver should remove itself from the game because if it could be clone chipped, it would be hands down the best card in the game.
That would be bad for the game. It would be really bad for the FFG are good at knowing when cards should remove themselves from the game.
Yeah. So we've got a fall guy, single fall guy.
Yeah. I didn't build this deck, so I don't know why there are more than one, but I like just playing one. You'll find it if you need it. It's just against decks that might have some way to kill Theophilus. Sometimes they'll C-source you not to kill you because you're basically unkillable, but they'll trash Theophilus, and then you either have to like levy and play him again, which is a bit of a pain, or they'll find some way to kill him. So we just use Fall Guy to save Theophilus, and you can cash it in for money. It's sometimes you can either use it for its other use, which is installing it before you install Theophilus and immediately cashing in for the money. So we don't have to discard. So Fall Guy's really, really sweet because of the trash game too. So it's always got that second mode. Yeah, I mean, we see this card in DLR battle. It's very, very playable.
Okay. We have a single Cuddy Jones.
Yeah, I've played versions of this deck without the Cutty, and I don't think you need it all that much. I know the idea is that you load up Catty, install Theophilus, and take off 1 billion credits, and you can do that, and that's fine. But a lot of the times, you just install Theophilus and like Magnum Opus twice. You're up to 4 with 4 cards in hand, and it's okay. But I mean, Catty's Catty, and it is nice that you can build up and then take off Theophilus, and she's pretty good against, like, just when you're playing fair, she's pretty good against like RP and HB. So again, if you are desperately looking for something to cut, you can cut the Catty. It's not as essential as you might think, but you know, it's good in this deck. It pulls its weight.
Right, it's insurance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've got a single same old thing. For the same reason you have all same old things, we have a lot of incredibly high value events. Yeah,
I'd say in this deck, a lot of the time I'm using same old thing against damage decks to install it and have a way to recur levy. That's actually one of the most common uses for same old thing. You're not quite like prepaid Kate. You're not just hoping to make his eye same old make his eye. Generally, when that happens, you just levy and go again. But yeah, it's got a ton of utility. Sometimes you same old game day if you lost a game day to hand size, and sometimes you same old indexing. Yeah, it's same old thing. But saving levy is huge. Get it down as soon as you draw it against damage decks.
Right. So we've got Lady. You already kind of touched on why it's there. There's a lot of green barriers that you really don't want to play around with Faust because it'll just destroy your hand size.
Exactly. Also, bear in mind that wraparound exists, so you can do the classic thing of having a lady in play that is empty and then just AIing through wraparound because it's now 0, even though your lady can't do anything. So you install it, you use it to break wraparound, save yourself a card, and then it sits in play and reduces the strength of wraparound.
Right. We've got a chameleon in here.
Yeah. So this is just kind of a catch-all solution. I don't find myself installing the chameleon a ton. I used to install it a lot more when I wasn't playing a Deus Ex version of this deck because it's insurance against Kamainu. You can use it for that anyway. You can also just use it to stop yourself from getting gear checked. This card's fine. You could cut it, but I like having it as insurance. It's such a pain. It's not a fractor, so it can't break wraparound, but it's still good to... Also, very relevantly... Yeah, I guess there is a big reason. It breaks Swordsman, and it's the only piece of breaker in this deck that does. I don't really know how you could afford influence for Mimic. So Chameleon's like Mimic with downside, which is fine, because no one plays Swordsman anyway.
Right. You mean except for that one guy? That does.
Yeah, someone always gets you with it, and you're salty. But yeah, it's worth having an answer. And also, as before, bear in mind that if you've got a clone chip in play, you can pump Faust, pitching Chameleon, and then clone chip back Chameleon, name Sentry, and break the Swordsman.
Right. So we've got a Deus Ex, and it's important to note that if you bring Chameleon back in that way, it'll return to your hand at the end of the turn.
Yes,
so you'll have it as an option for the following turn.
Yeah, so it's some synergy with clone chip. Deus Ex, like I said, a huge part of this is that it stops Kamainu, because otherwise Kamainu is essentially a hard counter. You can break it, but it's expensive. But also Deus Ex is Deus Ex. I mean, if you're facing Jinteki PE, you just try and recur Deus Ex a bunch of times and watch them get madder and madder as you get more and more points. And yeah, like I said, it breaks AP. So sometimes someone will res a Janus against you or something. You don't want to pitch a billion cards, so you just Deus Ex through it. A very, very good utility breaker. And also, this is important. Sometimes we put Deus Ex into play when we're going to use the notoriety turn against damage. Like notoriety, there's a shock in there, and you lose notoriety. So sometimes you have Deus Ex in play to stop you from losing your notoriety when you go to notoriety. It's worth mentioning that sometimes against like Jinteki decks, when you're going to notoriety for the win, you should vamp them and index them, because then you don't access any cards.
Right.
So yeah, Deus Ex avoids us. It means we don't lose our notoriety.
Were you in the you were in the draft after the World's Finals, right?
I wasn't. I saw it happening. I spent that evening playing other games, so I wasn't drafting afterwards.
Dan lost his copy of Apocalypse to a shock from Ren.
Oh, he told me. No, he told me about that outside as I was leaving. Because he showed me his deck. He was like, "Oh, check out this sick deck, Andrew." Because that's how Dan talks about everything he ever does. And I'm like, "Oh, cool, yeah, nice deck." He's like, "I've got Apocalypse on my deck." And I'm like, "Oh, sweet." So as I'm leaving, I'm like, "Oh, nice to see you, Dan." He's like, "Yeah, Ran got rid of my Apocalypse with a net damage or whatever." So that was excellent.
It's pretty good. So we have Faust. Faust is in the reasons for all the reasons we've already discussed.
It's got a skull on it. It's really cool. The art's cool. So yeah, it's a sick card.
Yeah, I mean, this made my noise deck, like when you talk about like my noise deck being like tier 2, like in the early spring, and then this card dropping with Street Peddler was just like putting rocket boosters on that deck.
Yeah, for real. When I was going to our pro circuit finals in the UK, I was on the train to London to play in them, and I was so worried about noise. And I was like, I'm just going to read my book to take my mind off this noise threat. And I was reading Count Zero, and I got to a bit in the book where halfway through like a page, it just says Faust as a single sentence on a line, and I saw that, and I was like, I can't escape from this card. It's everywhere. Just casting a shadow over the game. It killed Lotus Field.
It did. It did indeed. So we've got Zoo. Zoo's just backup if we have to play normal, I imagine.
Yeah. What's the reason? Oh, Turing is the reason to play this card, among other things.
Yeah, that's fair.
Faust can't bring Turing.
And we'll have the money for it.
Yeah, so Zoo. And again, it stops us being gear checked early. Sometimes people try and rush against this deck, and you want actual breakers sometimes.
Yep. We've got the Leprechaun for the late game MU.
Yeah, you can put 2 hyperdrivers on it. You could put a hyperdriver and a Mopus on it. You get it down when you can. Sometimes you have to improvise. You have to like let your Magnum Opus go out of play when you're confident you can win. But if you can get a Leprechaun down, it's super good. You SMC for it if you need it.
Right.
Your programs are very unlikely going to get trashed because you've bounced through everything.
Yep. And then we have 3 copies of Self-Modifying Code, my favorite card.
Yeah, the classic.
And it's in there for the same reason that Self-Modifying Code is in there, which it makes Shapers possible.
It's so crazy that they put the best tutor and all the best card drawer in the same faction. I'm not really sure what the thinking is behind that, but
I think it makes up for the generally strange breakers. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Because they're very situational, so they needed a tutor to deal with the fact that they have all these situational breakers. I don't have a problem with self-modifying code. I think it's good for the game. I think it's good for the game that Corpse can't just gear check and hope to get there, because SMC puts a big stop sign on that. A lot of the time in this deck, you want to mulligan and have either Magnum Opus or SMC in your hand, and then if you don't have the Magnum Opus, you do the classic play where you put down SMC, you gain 2 credits, you go and find Mopus, and you click up to 2. It hurts, but you have to do it.
Notable omissions. There are no sure gambles in this deck.
Yeah. We just want to find Magnum Opus as quickly as possible and go for it. Sure Gamble's a little bit awkward because Theophilus is going to steal all our money when he arrives anyway.
Right.
And we don't need Sure Gambles to get set up. We just need... First you get Mopus, then you use the money to afford Theophilus with it, or Theophilus with Hostage, and then you hit Magnum Opus a bunch of times, and then we don't need any other credit generators. Once you've got Mopus down, I mean, Sure Gamble is a gain over Mopus if you have it and you have the 5 credits, but we would probably just want to discard it to Faust anyway. So We don't need them. We don't need short gambles. If you wanted to, you could try it. I'm a big short gamble fan. I think people cut it too much. I think people cut it from noise when I don't think it's correct. So if you want to try cutting some of the like the weirder cards like the catty, you could try some short gambles, but it's not necessary.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's like whenever I see a deck where we're not playing sure gambles for whatever reason, I always think it warrants explanation because I want to get people out of that group think where it's like, well, you got to have sure gambles. Well, why? Explain. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if I see a deck list where someone isn't playing short gamble, they're either very smart or like very stupid. Like it is sometimes correct, but be sure that it is, because sometimes you're playing all these weird econ cards and you should just be playing short gamble.
And
this deck doesn't have weird econ cards in it. So.
I've definitely been burned. You know, before Harpsichord really got super potent and I had to actually put Plascretes into my noise deck. It's amazing how much having to include 2 Plascretes messes with Noise's internal engine, but that's me griping. But you know, I cut sure gambles for my noise deck because I only wanted Deja Vus in there because I didn't want to hit it with Street Peddler, and then I was street peddling in tournaments and hitting 2 Deja Vus. So
I mean that's just sod's law, isn't it? It'll always happen. But yeah, it's short gamble is still probably almost always correct in fair decks, and when you're making weird or unfair decks, then it might not warrant an inclusion. But yeah, I don't think it's worth it here. It's the window of the game where you'll really want it is so tiny that you're just, it's a waste of a click to play it a lot of the time. You should either be looking for Magnum Opus or hitting Magnum Opus. So.
Yeah, I agree. And it keeps it lean. You know, everything in this deck, for the most part, with the exception of literally maybe 1 or 2 cards, are cards that we're going to be happy to see when we come across them.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, thank you very much for going over this list.
No worries, I love this list. Like I said, give this list a go, play it on Jiteki or Octagon. It's fun. It's actually pretty difficult because you need to know when to go for the combo. You need to know when to stop going for the combo to disrupt the court. You need to know whether to try and just win fair, which you can do. Sometimes you need to fire off MIDI game days to just see a good chunk of your deck so you can disrupt what the corp is doing or whatever. So yeah, play it. It will probably make you better at the game, and you'll have a ton of fun because when you Notoriety 3 times, it's just excellent. Notoriety, click on it again.
It feels good.
Yeah, it does. If you're playing with a friend, you can, and you're playing a Notoriety combo, you can go when you're this good, and then you play the first Notoriety, and then you say it's hard, and you play the second one, and then you go not to grow a fan base, and then you play the third one. It's really funny. So play it. It's a fun card, and you'll finally get them out of the binder with this deck. It's good in this deck.
Yeah, that's how you make people salty, Alex.
Do it to your friends. Do not do it to strangers.
Do not do it to strangers. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate being here. Any chance to talk about this deck? I wanted to couple of shout outs because I didn't build this deck. The first instance I can find of this deck was Marcheva on Netrunner DB. Apparently it came second at Polish Nationals. I think this person was the originator of the deck. Oh no, they linked the original list in there. Okay, they linked the original list in their write up, but this is where the list got prominence. It's still a very highly voted CT deck. So thanks to him or her for making the deck popular. Kiv, who makes YouTube videos of him playing on Octagon, has played this deck a lot. That's how I heard about it. If you want to watch it played, go and find some of his videos. Shout outs to him.
And we'll link both of all these things in the show notes.
Yeah, and then also Calimsha has also been playing and refining this deck a bit. It's one of his favorite decks right now too. The list that we have here is the list that I've been playing, which is a slightly modified version of Calimsha's list. So shout out to Calimsha as well. I know we're going to link them, but I wanted to give them some credit through word as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a fun deck. I've seen it played a couple of times online. I haven't ever actually seen it played in person. But yeah, it's definitely one that I have a lot of interest with. Thanks for going over it with me. And you're going to be joining me for a couple more segments. So everybody stay tuned, and you're going to get a little bit more of Alex on the Black Hats channel. You can find us on YouTube, of course, and also Twitter and Facebook. Subscribe and share, and we'll catch you all next time.
Catch you in a minute, guys.